right? And we need to practice good practices, no more handshaking. We need to distance, right, and join the world and share our love. But
I think we also have to
we need to become humble again.
We'll have to give up egos. We have to give up egos.
Yeah. Oh, does that mean the president has to go?
Yes.
Did you hear that, Nick?
Yes, Professor Snyder has arrived.
Professor Snyder,
we should do quick introductions. Professor Snyder is the economics professor at Yale University School
We'll
of
let
Business.
him introduce himself.
Oh, well, yeah, he can introduce himself, but I'll just do a brief introduction for everybody. Ankit is with IBM TV, heads up the health channel. He's out of New Delhi. Kim is with IBM TV out of Raleigh. Abjeep is a guest, and I'm not sure what city he's beaming in from, and Pashish is a guest also, and I'm actually in the Raleigh-Durham area. I think, Professor Snyder, you're up in New Haven area, is that correct?
Gupta, are you in India?
Gupta. Mr. Gupta, are you in India?
Yeah, I'm in India.
Oh, also we're going to be joined with Senator Lemieux is going to show up from Florida, and the Honorable Daivd M. Walker is going to show up in about 15 minutes, who Professor Snyder probably knows who Daivd M. Walker was. He used to be the Comptroller General of the United States, so he's going to be here in about 15 minutes. But Professor Snyder, we want to know what's he wrote Come Back America. What's going on with the economy relating to this pandemic?
Well, Nicholas, thank you, and Kimberly, and it's good to see everybody else. I'm actually in West Falmouth, Massachusetts, Cape Cod.
Wow.
But I was in New Haven recently, and that's actually a pretty good place to be right now as well. But I feel very fortunate. What's happening with the economy, of course, is brutal. And I'm also concerned greatly about the health effects of shutting down many parts of our economy. So a lot of us have been talking about, well, we've got a COVID crisis and we have the economy, but I think of it as COVID, the economy, and more health issues down the road. So small businesses being shut down, unemployment, all that's going to lead to a lot of issues for the country related to obesity, suicide, depression, potential spousal abuse, achievement gaps in schools. So we've got a tough problem ahead of us, no doubt. In terms of the economy itself, seems like the market thinks that we're going to pull out of it okay, though.
Seriously. Well, the thing is, my question, and I'm sure David Walker is going to get into this later on, is the national debt that's increasing rapidly. And one metric they used to say, well, the national debt as a percentage of GDP was relatively the same. Okay. Professor Snyder, as we well know, the GDP is not going up this year. It's going down, and the debt's going up. Is anybody looking at the metric now of the United States debt ratio to gross domestic product, which I believe by the end of the year, we're not going to be on a 1-to-1 or even close to ratio. We're going to be upside down, similar to Italy, Spain, and Greece during their tenure with the European Union.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on this?
So that's the other problem with what we're doing right now, of course, is that we're seeding the world with all kinds of problems, and the U.S. economy itself has been doing really well. Our debt to GDP ratio has been good, but our unfunded liabilities also are growing now. And one of the concerns I have with bad economic policy at this juncture is it's going to compound the problems that you just identified.
Mm-hmm.
If we bail out, okay, everybody wants to get a bailout. If we bail out, say, the airline industry, well, why not? They deserve it, right? Well, next will be the auto industry, and next will be Boeing, and next will be hospitality. And then who in the world is going to be able to turn down students who have debt? Mm-hmm. And local governments and state governments and pension plans? And then that debt to GDP, I mean, I don't know what number we'll end up with, but it's going to be that we really need to pay attention to the issue you just raised.
Yeah, but isn't this the next tsunami? I mean, if we looked at the virus 5 years ago, there was a guy named Bill Gates. You may have heard of him, running around doing TED talks on, hey, there's going to be a virus. It's the worst thing that's going to happen. It's going to cost the United States $3 trillion. I mean, it's almost dead on, but no one listens to Bill Gates. But he's talking about a very unpopular subject. There's a gentleman who's been yelling about the debt ratio. There he is. He's going to be on our show in about 15 minutes. David Walker. He's been yelling about this for 20 years that I know of.
Yeah.
Okay. When is when is he going to be the next Bill Gates going, well, I told you so, when the debt to GDP ratio goes out of kilter and that argument vaporizes?
I don't think it has to. I think we're enough brains in this world that we should be able to slow it down, and reopen the gates.
That would be good. But Professor Snyder, you know that we cannot address a problem when we don't admit that we have a problem. Would that be correct?
Okay, so I get some tension here between Kimberly and Nicholas. Which
no, we're good friends. You don't have to get any tension here.
We do just get the show going.
It's for television. So go on.
But, I think one of the challenges that we have is, can we deal with this crisis, but have enough bandwidth to look ahead and not make mistakes that are going to aggravate other problems? And one of the things that it seems to me to be relevant, I actually took classes from Milton Friedman back in the days.
I saw that. Booth School.
When Milton said, one of the things that's dangerous about public policy is that you have identifiable beneficiaries and identifiable people who are going to be harmed, but it's sometimes hard to identify the people down the road. Who's going to lose their job? Who's going to lose their pension? Who's going to have a greater risk of an opioid death? So I think a fundamental challenge for us now is, as we're starting to get close to the flattening, looking okay, is to look broader at total risks, total benefits, and I hope that we can. But I guess I'm a little bit more pessimistic maybe than Kimberly. I see our politicians focusing and the media focusing on just what is in front of us because it's awful.
Well, and I agree with you, but why can't we? What I'm saying is, I agree with you. I actually, if you look at what I post, I'm the biggest pessimist right now in the world. Mm-hmm. Like, I can't understand why our government cannot agree on the most deadliest impact on our country we have ever seen, and we're fighting over whether kids go to school or not. I mean, I'm just beyond containment right now. But what I'm asking is why can we not humble ourselves a little bit, set aside our differences, and make this work? We're a bunch of very intelligent people. We were talking about this earlier. We're going to have to humble ourselves in order to do business as a global community again. And we're going to have to establish trust. And all of that is going to have to happen in one word: transparency.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, think of that. That's all well and good. But the thing is, are we looking at a depression or a recession, or are we going to go back to normal? Professor Snyder, what do the economic models say? Or do they say anything?
Well, yeah, they don't say a lot.
They argue.
Well, I know they're going to argue, but
we now know, of course, it's a useful simplicity to say, okay, we have this flattening period, right? And then after that, we're going to have an interim period. And that interim period is characterized by having enough health capacity to deal with this virus, but not having immunity from it, either herd or vaccine-based immunity. That's the period where there's most uncertainty from economics and business. And I'm a little bit on the pessimistic side, again, because I don't know that we're capable of dealing with deaths due to COVID during this crisis. I'm worried that people are just going to freak out and say, we got to revert back to shuttering everything. Whereas here's the good case scenario, where we have good testing. We identify people who are superheroes. That's the phrase for people who've gotten this COVID-19 and who have survived. We identify people who are high risk, senior citizens like myself, people with underlying health conditions. We tell them, we give them good guidance. And then the third group of people who are not at risk, not high risk, but who haven't had the disease, we really need to trust them to exercise judgment about entering into social activity and economic activity. I'm just not convinced that the government authorities are thinking about trusting individuals during this between period, which is going to be so critical to how we come out of it. We can't shut down the economy for 12 months. We'll be and deep yogurt, as they say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but isn't that the plan, is to shut down the economy? And if they do plan on bringing back the economy, see our thoughts, and on Wednesday we do our tech groups come in, and one thought is to have a COVID-19 certified people with testing and retesting, because if you went on an airplane and you were COVID-19 certified, just like you're TSA certified, and so was everybody else on the airplane, then what's wrong with having the airplane blast off? There shouldn't be anything wrong with it, but we do need to have the test in order to have people COVID-19 certified and bring people back on. So we're going to bring our tech people on Wednesday, and then our doctors show up on Friday in terms of the medical solutions. Right now, we handicap 267 potential coronavirus cures. Actually, that comes from Forbes magazine. Okay, but we have somebody asking from the internet. They're going, this question for you: are the high debt countries looking at debt default? And if yes, would the economy have resources to bail them out? In other words, the high debt countries are going to, what happens if they default? Like Italy, that had a high GDP to debt ratio. Spain, they weren't in good financial shape. What happens if they default? What's the next step?
Well, those are, of course, embedded in the European Union, which then raises the next question of what will Germany and the other stronger countries do? But I think that's a really good question. I don't know. I think the EU's survived pretty darn well, but this could be its greatest challenge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because the thing is, both those countries are going to have a real problem getting people back to work. Fiat, from what I understand, is actually doing a COVID-19 certification program to bring people back to work as we speak. So they're already moving in that direction as a private industry, but the rest of them I'm not really sure about. Now, Gupta had another question, I believe. Ankit, there was 3 of them last time we looked at. What we did is we collect the questions just for you, Professor Snyder. So when the questions come in, what was the question number 2? Oh, here it is. We have people from India, and we have people that are on our program from all over the world. So, but a lot of people are from India and the United States. Is there any economic opportunity for India, and how to manage the fiscal deficit the crisis would cause?
Boy, that's a good question, and I'm humbled. I go back to my days when I spent time in India with C.K. Prahalad, the famous management guru, and we worked with Indian multinationals. And one thing C.K. did when he worked there with these top CEOs, and I was the bystander, is that he asked these kinds of questions. How can you take this period of challenge and raise the aspirations as high as possible, knowing that India has tremendous human capital, extraordinarily bright people, the English common law system, democracy, connections all around the world. What can Indian multinationals do to take advantage of this opportunity? I think that's the right question. I'm not smart enough to know what exactly those opportunities are, but I think it's a great question.
Yeah, and there was one more question, I believe, for Professor Snyder. Just have to move it to number 3. Ankit has it. Okay, how much time would it require for this is a good question, for the global economy to normalize at pre-corona stage? How long is this going to take?
Well, as economists always say, and everybody else says, and I'm in the consensus, it depends on testing. And Germany is moving ahead with testing much more effectively. Switzerland, where are we going to be with testing? We have to find out how many people have had this virus. We have to find out how many people have not. and are in the potentially low risk category. But testing is number one. And then pre-herd immunity, pre-vaccine based immunity, a lot of it's going to depend on whether we get these treatments. So people feel, well, I could go out and get it, but I'm not going to have a high chance of really having grave problems as a result. So I think the news there could be good, though, right? I mean, we all should tune in on Wednesday, but it just seems like there's. Gilead just had a positive result out of their small sample.
Yeah, remdesivir.
Yeah, so it could work out if we can get testing and treatment.
Mm-hmm. Right, and so
well, and I think, did you have a question?
Okay. Well, there was one more. How the economy is going to be taken care of during the time of lockdown. In other words, how long is this lockdown going to last? Because remember, it's going worldwide. That's the reason we have lots of people from all over the world watching our show. But how long is this going to take place, and what's going to be the role of the central banks?
Well, I hope the banks don't take out equity and companies. I think that's one of. I'll be interested to see what David Walker has to say about this. But I think that's a mistake. We don't really want governments having a seat at the table. And as painful as it would be to have a lot of these companies go bankrupt, I think we want the central banks to provide liquidity. I'm okay with the high yield debt market. They're being very aggressive, but they need to draw the line there. Mm-hmm. In terms of other things the government needs to do is they need to get these programs that are working to work better. Getting money to people who are unemployed, to the small businesses. 48% of jobs in the United States come from small businesses. That's not an unusual number. It's much greater in countries like India. So we have to be able to get support to these small businesses. They have what economists and business people call franchise value, and that once the economy comes back, they will be valuable. But they have to get over this solvency problem. So governments need to focus on getting money out there in the very near term, and that's been a challenge here in the U.S.
Mm-hmm. And what is the unemployment rate going to be at the end of April? I've heard reports from the Federal Reserve in Dallas that we're looking at high double digits as we sit right now, but I've heard unemployment rates as high as 32%. Is that possible that we get to depression level unemployment rates?
Yes, it is.
I don't hear that.
and this is one of these tough things right now. We've lost 10% of the workforce, probably, and it could easily double. That is staggering for families, for individuals, for communities. Mm-hmm. And one of the things to pay attention to is government, as they did in the Great Recession in the US, they extended the timeline for unemployment benefits. And you can understand why. That it's fair, it makes sense. On the other hand, that lengthened the period of depressed economic activity in 2008 and 2009 because people had a cushion. So this is going to be a tough problem, whatever the level is it going to, let's take 20%. I think that's a good estimate. Then the next question is, are we going to try to let people claw their way back, or are we going to extend benefits, in which case I think we're in for a slower recovery.
Yeah.
Somebody had a really good idea the other day. I actually liked it. I'm sure the government's going to hate it, but it was Dr. Yu, who comes on our show occasionally to share a good sense of humor and also some excellent science and stem cell technology, but also research in the corona. And he said, you know what would make his life easier is if they just relaxed the taxes this year and not make anybody